My name is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast. And welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast with your host, Norm Volsky. And today I'm honored to be able to introduce our guest, Jason Parrott, who is currently SVP of Enterprise Growth and Partnerships at Vida Health, has been for the last couple of years. And before that, he led health and well-being strategy at Boeing for 8+ years. And before joining Boeing was leading benefit strategy at AT&T, and that was over an 18-year period. So Jason, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Norm.
Yeah, well, we'll dive into it. You've been in the benefits space for 25+ years now. Kind of walk us through like how you entered the benefits and HR world.
Yeah, so early in my career, I really started in the HR function on the telecom side and worked through a number of different opportunities and different HR functional capacities, and ultimately had a really unique opportunity to broaden my horizons once again and see what this whole benefits arena is all about, and learned a ton, had a lot of great, I'd say, leaders along the way. And also concurrent with that timing during the 90s and beyond, we had, every year it was a new merger and acquisition. So that was kind of, the current state of that telecom environment back in the 90s, and, just the industrial engine when we look at all the investment that was flowing into that space. So it was very exciting. But through those mergers and acquisitions, as you might imagine, Norm, there's an opportunity to try to figure out, how do we synergize, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that we're doing between two companies and melding that together. And benefits, like all other functions, comes into that mix. How are we going to optimize what we're doing from a benefits capacity so mm-hmm. that we can leverage, a very strong, robust portfolio that meets the needs of our employees and their covered dependents?
Did you intentionally, out of college, go into benefits, or did you kind of, fall into HR?
Yeah, great question. And it was pure luck. During, the early 90s, the U.S. was under an economic recession. I probably sent out a few hundred resumes to different Fortune 500 companies. And, there wasn't much activity from a hiring sense. So, I really lucked out. Had a great opportunity to jump into Ameritech, which at the time was a regional bill operating company, divested from AT&T back in the early 80s. And they were going through a significant transformation. And it was just amazing to work with brilliant leaders in the HR capacity. I had a few special projects just to help out. And ultimately, they brought me on full time soon thereafter. And from that, I've been very grateful to have, I'd say, the support and, a great mm-hmm. team of leaders along the way that really helped me kind of think bigger picture about, mm-hmm. what that HR function can really do. And benefits, certainly is a core piece of that.
And walk me through your evolution in your career at AT&T. Over an 18-year period, I'm sure you worked your way up the ranks. And by the end, I know you had a huge job within their benefits and HR department. So kind of walk us through your progression there. And then what was going on in the industry from the time you joined to kind of the time you were wrapping up over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a great podcast by Jocko Willink that really gets to the point around good. Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't get a promotion, good, I have more time to work harder. Or if I don't get the resources I need, good, I'm going to figure out ways to be more resourceful and efficient. So
I saw that on Instagram yesterday. That is eerie.
I love it because it's so true to when we think about the realities of, everyday business realities and what we might need to compete for from not just our own personal and professional development, career, mindset, but just from, delivering good for, the stakeholders that, we're working mm-hmm. with, whether it's a large employer like an AT&T or some other, smaller mid-sized company or whatever the case might be. There's always an opportunity to do good and deliver good. And take that mindset regardless of the adversity you might confront. So early on, we really were trying to, I would say, transform a 60,000 employee company that was going through enormous change in the telecom arena, great investment, and back in the late 90s, around 99, 2000, we had a wonderful opportunity. It was an acquisition. So I was on the acquired company side, getting acquired and integrated. And concurrent with that confluence of events, there was the dot-com era. And everybody was jumping, going across the street, making more money with equity and taking a shot on this whole dot-com, swirl. And it was fascinating. I was maybe more of a contrarian, sticking to my roots within where I started my career on the telecom side. So SBC Communications acquired Ameritech, and then later, about 5-6 years later, acquired AT&T and kept the iconic global brand name. But it was amazing as you look at the trajectory from a business standpoint, from 60,000 employees, which later morphed into covering 1.2 million lives, $6 billion annual benefit spend, and ensuring nearly 1 in every 300 Americans. If I just step back and think about if I go to Wrigley Field and watch a Cubs game, there's over 30,000 people in attendance. But if you really do the math, we're insuring nearly north of 100 fans that are at that ballpark under AT&T benefits. So it's an enormous opportunity when you put into context what implications that we present for all of our employees, their covered dependents, and certainly the grandfather retirees that were fortunate enough to work for decades and earn post-retirement subsidized benefits.
Well, I hope they had some corporate tickets for those employees at Wrigley.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. That's a great perk. So, kind of walk me through just how the benefits and HR landscape changed, over that decade plus at AT&T. Like, what was new and innovative when you started? And by the end of your, journey there, like, what was some of the new solutions bubbling up that you were starting to see?
Yeah, so I'll give you 2 quick answers. One, from an HR dimension, I had, again, brilliant leaders like Dominique Laporte and Karen Paul and Alan Williams, and, over time, Warren Mickens and other folks. But we were trying to take the HR function, and specifically benefits too, from a reactive transaction mindset business to more of a predictive or proactive mindset. So how can we look ahead around the curve and anticipate where we can address or identify unstated needs of the business and be in front of that as opposed to being reactive to, stuff happening. So that was, I would say a pivot that even to this day, now that we're in 2023, there's a number of companies that have, at different points in time, including right now, are really trying to figure that out, which I think continues to be a real market opportunity when we think from a consulting standpoint or from a business standpoint. But from a benefit standpoint, what we also saw was, this uptick. Not too long ago, I would present at Midwest Business Group on health as a keynote. And, I remember just a few years back, it was like in the US, the GDP was number 1 in the world. But when you look at the healthcare component to it, it was around $3.6 trillion for the year just in US GDP. Today, we're north of $4 trillion. So it's no wonder when you look at the Bezos, the Buffett, you look at John Doerr from a Kleiner Perkins standpoint, from a VC standpoint, from JP Morgan Chase, they're all focusing beyond their core competencies of what they've done for decades and going after this $4 trillion opportunity. And with that creates just an enormous upside potential and opportunity to do good when we think about how can we take out the $1 and $3 spent that are attributed to waste and fraud and over testing and over prescribing. So, that was really kind of in the past decade, I would say, just the skyrocket of new emerging digital health innovators that came into the picture. And they're all taking their own shots, and many are narrowly focused, but they're all trying to do better than what the market had offered previously. And I think that creates a wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn, identify, curate, and ultimately take shots with these promising solutions that can do good.
What were some of the challenges you experienced at AT&T, through multiple acquisitions and just like where the market was?
Yeah, so nearly every year we had a significant blockbuster acquisition. When I look back in time, just within AT&T, if you look at, at that moment in time back in 2012 and predating 2012, if you looked at the top 10 largest merger and acquisitions by deal size, by dollars, and then ultimately, if you even take a look at the number of employees impacted, I want to say there's like 4 out of the top 10 that were attributed squarely on AT&T. Every year there was a new massive acquisition. So there was a constant, state of change within the 4 walls as we were trying to evolve and innovate and enhance all that we were doing from a size and scale, standpoint globally as well as domestically in the US. And what that creates a lot of pressure, certainly amongst communications, amongst organizational structure and redesign and organizational development. But certainly from a compensation benefits, there's a lot of potential change that impacts maybe one cohort of employees versus another based on what changes are ultimately implemented. And there's a real opportunity to realize those synergies, which we would, map out over a 3-year time horizon to really identify how can we bring efficiencies of scale. And, that was really the key focus.
What were the challenges around geography? Like when you're making that many acquisitions, you're moving away from the, home base, so to speak. So, what did you and your team do to combat the fact that probably at the beginning you were talking about a bunch of employees in one area, and then by the end of your tenure, 18 years later, you probably had employees in almost every state?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the case. We had employees everywhere, right? Over 60 countries, all 50 states. And the reality is we had these complex, bargaining agreements with various unions, so we were, if not number one, definitely in the top 3 as largest private employers of unionized labor. Very important to have a very positive working relationship with those constituents and labor leaders as well. And it was almost like the Olympics. It seemed like every 3-4 years, it was time for, bargaining negotiations and working through that. And as, we look in the media today, that's, certainly something that's currently in play with the big 3 automakers. So it's imperative to have a positive, I would say, relationship with all your employees, no matter if they're bargain, non-bargain, union, non-union, salaried or hourly paid, and really trying to understand what matters most to them, regardless of the geographic territory. I'll give you a quick example. When we think back to the Pacific Telesys acquisition way back in the mid to late 90s, they were mostly in California and Nevada. And those employees, definitely had a past healthcare relationship with Kaiser Permanente. So, that was one example where like, hey, we need to have an HMO through Kaiser in California because it's so important to various communities where our employees and, covered dependents are at. So those are just some examples of really understanding what's important to those various companies that you do acquire and integrate, and what is their current state of benefits or compensation or other, HR functions relative to ours. And we took a D3 process approach called design through detailed discovery. And we would just map out side-by-side comparison charts to understand what do they have today, what do we have today, where do we want to be in the future so we can synergize and bring both parties together in a harmonized way. And it was a pretty exhaustive process, but at the end of the day, it did a lot of good to help us understand with the 360 view, how can we advance our mission together in the best way possible.
Yeah, just you got tremendous experience in that time, and I think that it's no coincidence that there's a lot of folks who started their career, spent a good chunk of their career at AT&T that are now other places, running the show. So, already we've had 2 former AT&T, benefits HR, folks on the podcast. And I think our first 12, 13 episodes between you and Nathan counts. So it's, great to see that, AT&T just does a great job of exposing people to a lot of complexity, whether it's, acquisitions, labor and unions, different things that they can apply elsewhere and really move, other companies forward. What are you most proud of from your time at AT&T? What were some of the accomplishments, you look back on and you just, gives you a lot of joy?
Yeah, we really, took a team approach with everything we did, with a company of that size. When I exited out to go to Boeing, we're a Fortune 10, had over 300,000 employees and over 125 billion in market cap at that moment in time. So it was very complex, very large, and it was, I'd say, integral to really take the resources that we did have in-house and, work in a harmonized way to accomplish a number of opportunities. Much of it, was attributed to the M&A deals that we were doing as far as integrating employees and, benefit plan updates and communications was essential. It also gave us a fresh opportunity to take a look at, benefit vendor RFPs, whether it's medical or PBM or dental or vision, and really try to find ways to, get the best in class, pricing and outcomes that we were hoping to achieve with all those efforts, but also have an eye towards innovation. And, I learned a ton from a number of great leaders, and worked, closely with many of them as well, through all those years. But, it's really trying to plot out, and we tended to take more of an annualized approach like most employers do, as far as what are those big priorities we're going to focus on for the year, despite whatever might be to the side in regards to maybe M&A or whatever else, or bargaining negotiations as well. How can we be, ready proactively to meet those, demands and needs, and how do we resource that too? So, it was a wonderful experience. All being said, as far as having, I would say, a team-based approach. And we didn't have the luxury of using a ton of, consultants and consulting hours for everything we did. We used that very, I would say, sparingly relative to tapping into their market expertise, maybe on an actuarial front, or maybe on a vendor RFP front, where, their expertise could augment what we were looking to do and make sure that we didn't miss anything as we were working through those efforts.
What attracted you to Boeing?
Yeah, it was twofold. I spent a decade through a few corporate relos, starting my career in Chicago, moving down to Texas, to San Antonio for 5 years, and then Dallas for 5 years with the headquarter relo with AT&T back in 2008. Love Texas, great friendships, great neighbors. But we, it was more of a family, personal decision. We had both of our daughters born down in San Antonio, and they were reaching an age around second grade, kindergarten. And, just as a family decision, we felt it was the right time to boomerang back to Chicago to be around our extended family, our parents, our grandparents, that were all, in the area, and surround our daughters, around extended family, and, get back to Chicago. So, I had a wonderful opportunity to do that through AT&T, which I accepted. And then about a week or two later, the Boeing opportunity came up, which was too good to pass. And so I had to, gracefully and gratefully say thanks, but no thanks to AT&T. And Marty Webb was terrific. Many of the folks within AT&T down in Texas had relocated way back in the day from St. Louis. So they had experienced those corporate reloads with family and the family dynamics that go with that. And at the end of the day, they really, truly wish everybody, their very best with whatever they may choose to do from a career and family dynamic. And it was really no looking back once we made the decision to move back up to Chicago, working at Boeing at the world headquarters up there. And, it was a similar opportunity where you had another 100-year-old company with massive scale and complexity, global in nature, and just like AT&T. And here we go again. How can we optimize everything we're doing at the Boeing company to do good for our customers, our employees, their covered dependents from a benefit standpoint. But it was amazing, and it was kind of rinse repeat when I think about that transition with the people. Just brilliant leaders across the board. And that's the one thing I really appreciated most. It was a very smooth, comfortable transition, going from a Fortune 10 to a Fortune 30, world's largest telecom, the world's largest aerospace company, and really helping the team and the greater good achieve, all the good we can bring forward to everybody.
What were early challenges? What were a couple things that once you went over to Boeing, you're like, oh, I never encountered this at AT&T, or, this is a little bit tougher, maybe because less buying power. Like, what were the biggest challenges up front?
Yeah. So, just to put into context, again, Fortune 10, $6 billion annual benefit spend, moving over to a Fortune 30, $3 billion annual, benefit spend. So both
still
are massive.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
It's not a huge
but nonetheless, it's a great question. The one thing that was a clear, I would say, difference was, for good reason, there was a history within Boeing to, leverage, consultants for
Mhm.
various statements of work. And, I would say more so than what I had previously experienced at AT&T. So we took a fresh look right out of the gate as far as what made, sense for the company, as far as how we leverage benefits consultants and what statements of work, and, how can we ensure that, we're getting, the most value for, what we're investing in that. And we learned a great deal out of that exercise, which was about an
Mhm.
18-month RFP. But that was kind of a springboard, at least for me, to take a deeper
Mhm.
look and a lens towards procurement and benefits contracts and RFPs, and really trying to optimize how we can do better with regards to medical and PBM and innovation and
Mhm.
vision and everything else that's more traditional in nature from a benefit standpoint, while also weaving in a number of innovators, which I gotta honestly say we didn't see a ton of that pre 2012 when I was at AT&T.
Yeah.
Post
There might
2012,
have been Castlight and a couple of wellness companies at that
totally.
point.
It just mushroomed. I mean, it was amazing from like 2012, and forward. There was just a ton of opportunity to try to reimagine, where do we want to go with mental
Mhm.
health? Where do we want to go with managing pharmacy benefits or chronic condition management or navigation? And, all those questions were really, I would say, uniquely timed with, leading into when I had the privilege of meeting some of the folks at EHIR, and joining that community and really
Mhm.
adopting and accelerating the promise of all this digital health innovation that was coming forward.
That's incredible. Interestingly enough, I started my career in 2012. I graduated college in 2012, started in this field, started in hospital software, but wanted to, kind of move into a new market, build my own thing. So it was funny. I was just at an EHIR event this week in Vegas, and I was talking to a handful of people, just laughing, looking back on like my first couple searches for Livongo. They're like, yeah, we want some people who've sold employer benefits. And there wasn't a huge list. Like, there wasn't a ton of companies to go after. We still got it done for them, but, it's gotten a lot easier over the years, in finding more candidates that have that experience. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot more competition for that talent. So that poses different challenges, but at least we got options now. Before it was, you'd have to turn every stone because there weren't many of them. So kind of walk me through when you met EHIR, what your initial reaction was, and eventually you joined their board of directors for a handful of years.
Yeah, it was amazing. Great people, great focus, great
Couldn't agree more.
community, and a great network. I would tell you early on, I was innately curious about all these innovators. I was getting bombarded every week with emails and phone calls from innovator XYZ saying, "Hey, we just want to pitch our solution to you. What do you say?" And generally, I'd say yes, and maybe give 15, 20 minutes. If I liked what, they had to say, maybe it would go 30, and, we'd call it good from there. And then, maybe there's something there, and we perhaps, pursue some due diligence thereafter.
Mhm.
So it turned out coincidentally that an innovator had reached out to me who I said yes to, and we
Mhm.
met and in person at Boeing headquarters. And they said, "Jason, you got to meet the crew over at EHR. They're just starting up. Let me put
Mhm.
you in touch." And it's kind of stealth mode, invitation only. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
the secret club. They're just starting up. So I said, "That's great. That sounds awesome. Love to meet and talk." So that's how it all started. And met the crew over at EHIR, back in the very beginning, and
Mhm.
joined the original founding cohort one, which was still getting built out to account for roughly 20 Fortune 50, jumbo employers that were all trying to
Mhm.
deal with the same complexities and challenges from a healthcare and well-being standpoint. So it's just fabulous, from that point forward. And not too long after that, they asked, "Hey, we think it might be good to start up like, a board or
Mhm.
advisory group, within to help us kind of think through where do we want to take EHR for the future." And I
Mm-hmm.
had a ton of ideas, so I raised my hand. And another peer of mine, Jim Huffman, who had previously worked at Bank of America, leading benefits there, and then later Fidelity Investments,
Yep.
he raised his hand too, and we jumped on board and said, hey, let's do this. Let's think long term. How can we scale up EHIR and do some really good stuff, not just amongst cohort one, but really look at really enhancing and expanding the good they can bring to a health plan innovator roundtable side, or a provider innovator roundtable, or DE&I, or
Mm-hmm.
legal, or procurement, or marketing, or there's a ton of other ideas. And from that, we even had some blue sky whiteboard sessions where we just ideate, and kick around, spitball some ideas about, wouldn't it be great if we had a solution that did XYZ? And
Mm-hmm.
that created some fun discussion around incubating ideas that could ultimately become businesses and address a market gap. So it was just phenomenal. But over time,
Mm-hmm.
as we were scaling up, that's where, Norm, I reached out to folks like Nate and many others, by the way, that ultimately some of them filled out cohort one. So we got to 20, that magic number we
Mm-hmm.
were aiming for. And then over time, we branched off into cohorts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And on the employer side, that each had respectively 20 employer members apiece. But it was really great validation from those people that said yes and joined subsequent cohorts over time, that said, this is great. The networking, the relationships, the efficiencies that they could gain was just
Mm-hmm.
enormous. And it's been a ton of fun.
Well, I know I'm one of many people that are appreciative that you raised your hand, because I've been positively impacted by them. And just for our listeners that aren't as familiar, I assume many of our listeners are familiar with EHIR. Michael, their CEO, has been my first guest on this podcast, so I've been touting their abilities for a long time. But for those who don't know, the essence of EHIR is the goal is to be a benefits leader's best friend. Right now, a benefits leader is inundated with outreach from vendors. I would argue hundreds of vendors are reaching out to them per month, if not more. And it's hard for someone with, not a ton of resources, and a bunch of things they have to do on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis for their employees to be able to vet hundreds of digital health solutions all in 1 year, or, month, or whatever it may be. So what EHIR does is they vet these companies for them and then provides recommendations on which vendors are worth their time. So it really saves a benefits leader a lot of time and energy, and has, multiple vetting resources, because most likely they're going to have their benefits leader, take a quick peek at it. They're going to have their benefits consultant, but they want additional vetting, and, EHIR does a great job of that. So anything you'd like to add, Jason, because you've actually sat in the seat where they've helped?
It really helped give us a platform to mechanize how we identify, curate, evaluate, and ultimately award and implement, promising solutions. And
Mm-hmm.
out of all that, it gave us great exposure to learn from each other, which, if we weren't like a first or early adopter because of timing and priorities, maybe a year or two down the road, we might be a fast follower. But we could
Yep.
point back to some of our colleagues in cohort one and say, hey, you went forward with, whoever. How did it go? How was your implementation? What successes, what
Mm-hmm.
learned lessons did you have? And how can we mitigate risk, but also maybe adopt if that's going to be a best in class solution that meets what we're looking for as well a year or two
Yeah.
later? So it really made our efforts a lot more effective and efficient. And
Mm-hmm.
it was reciprocal too. We were always, interested in helping each other, learn from our
Mm-hmm.
experiences as well. So just wonderful all around.
Yeah, I think whenever you can, be surrounded by peers of similar quality and, learn from each other, you're better off for it. I do it personally. I'm a member of the Pinnacle Society, which is a, consortium of recruiters nationally, that our goal is continuing education and, really elevating just like the profession in general through learning as much as we can, and then spreading that to our peers and other folks who do what we do. So I see EHIR as very similar for the benefits leaders, and it's just great to see how much everyone really benefits from it. It's really a win-win-win for all parties involved. So walk me through, you've seen, I don't know, probably hundreds, if not thousands of these vendors, come and go. Which vendors did you work closest with, maybe at the tail end of AT&T, but specifically at Boeing, because that's when the real, mushrooming of the industry happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would tell you, going back to maybe 2013, 2014, that was really where we were kind of taking off, launching. And I would say over the next 3 to 5 years, we hit our stride,
Mhm.
certainly at Boeing with regards to curating, identifying. But we saw a number of promising solutions that in recent years have either had an IPO that was successful or hit unicorn valuation of $1 billion or greater. And
Mhm.
for that, I think that's amazing when we think about something that was originally just an idea from a founder or
Sure.
CEO who had a 30-minute Shark Tank style pitch to 20 of us, and we took them under our wing as a client and early adopter, and were able to really learn from that experience, but also refine and optimize what they were doing and
Mhm.
how they were doing it in a continually improved, better way year over year. So, just to throw out some names, I was looking at over 300 innovators each year.
Yeah.
I probably only had bandwidth to, realistically implement award maybe the top 1%. So maybe three at
Mhm.
most in a given year, give or take. But we saw some really great solutions come through. Just to throw some names out, Vida Health was one that in
Mhm.
2017, I never saw a whole health solution at all. Every solution I saw
Wow.
was narrowly focused with a core competency, and they were singularly focused to address one thing and try to do it best in class. But I didn't really see anything that brought like the chronic, the mental, and the physical preventive lifestyle all
Mhm.
together in a human centric, tech enabled way. So that was super thrilling and exciting for me because we were finding a lot of, I'd say, gaps in the traditional healthcare system.
Mhm.
So if you or I went to a primary care doc, you get your physical, diagnosis of whatever that might be, and you're on your way. And it might be a
Mhm.
7-minute visit at most. Whereas, there was no depression screening or GAD or PHQ to see if there's any underlying mental health needs from anxiety, depression. So as we're innovating within the Boeing team on setting up direct contracted ACOs and critical mass markets at Boeing, that was a glaring opportunity by which
Mhm.
we identified what if we melded primary care, the physical with the mental and kind of gelling it together. And that's essentially what was the vision and the model at Vida. And they already built it up and, launched in 2014. So it wasn't like, they just started last week when I met them in
Yeah.
2017, but moved forward with them. And that was great. We launched them and, soon thereafter and, had great outcomes. Some other, players that we did launch, Castlight was another one,
Mhm.
98.6, Almada, Livongo. We took shots across the board. We wanted to
Mhm.
provide, I would say, optionality and choice to our members. And because these were early innovators, we wanted to learn from our experience. Those that succeed and do well, maybe we retain them over time. Those that do not, maybe we go a different direction. But at the end of the
Mhm.
day, we were trying to really, do good with bringing these solutions forward that could address some, I would say, higher areas of focus and interest from our side. So when we think about mental health and improving access and
Mhm.
affordability, Vida could certainly fill that along with chronic condition management. When we think about, weight loss and other areas or navigation, we saw other solutions that could, check the box off as far as providing what we evaluate as maybe a best in class solution at that moment in time. But we also saw year over year just a ton of investment, right, into these spaces and evolution with these solutions, some which ultimately over time became more stagnant with what they were innovating and
Mhm.
evolving, and others were lapping them up. So, it was really interesting as we were trying to keep tabs on who's doing well and how can we help them, if not be best in class, achieve best in class. But that was the aim early on. But over
Mhm.
time, we created like this complex vendor ecosystem of point-based
Mhm.
solutions where we had something for a lot of different purposes. So how do you help people identify what I need at the end of the day? So, today I would say we're kind of in this point solution fatigue phase where,
For sure.
some employers have just, maybe dozens of point solutions. And how can we simplify and optimize that employee experience
Hmm.
or that member experience and maybe do more with less or pare back where it makes sense and
Hmm.
ensure that we're getting that economic value and the clinical outcomes that we originally expected out of these solutions that we launched. So we're seeing like this pendulum go from what was traditional with health plans and PBMs and dental and
Hmm.
vision plan administrators to a bunch of point-based solutions. And now it's kind of shifting back towards, let's optimize and retain those that are best in class that are doing great for us. But,
Yeah.
if we went too far one way, let's try to rein it in a little bit and,
Hmm.
try to deliver better engagement and outcomes altogether.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And have a lot of friends at all of those either companies or people who, were at those companies for a very long time. Walk me through why you chose to join Vida. Um, you've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of companies. You worked with, maybe a couple dozen, over your years. Like, what about Vida was special?
Yeah. It was a process that I did not react to quickly. I would
Hmm.
say internally for probably the better part of 3 years, this whole innovator spirit inside me was just gnawing at me to, go take the leap from the employer side to the innovator side.
Hmm.
And it was tough because I didn't know when was the right time to go. So I wanted to
Yeah.
ensure like some of the priorities I was focused on, saw the finish line, and it was a good moment in time to make that transition over. I would say so. June of 2021 roughly was when I made the pivot from the employer
Hmm.
side to the innovator side with Vida. And there was a few reasons why. I would say I saw within maybe an employer side, you can directly influence good for that cohort of employees and covered
Hmm.
dependents and maybe grandfather retirees. And if you're fortunate to serve on the boards of other groups on health and organizations and speak at different events, maybe you'll be lucky to inspire one or two employers in the audience to follow your lead or take some action.
Hmm.
And, I like to think with talking with other colleagues as successful in doing that. But when you
Hmm.
make the leap to the innovator side, you have this realm of opportunity that is exponential. I mean, you could help
Hmm.
anyone, anywhere, anytime, and you're not beholden to the four walls of whatever employer you might be working with. So as far as
Hmm.
like the catalyst or springboard for doing good across a bigger space was certainly appealing. And Vida, I think the real simple answer is I knew the leadership team. I believed in the model and the product. I really had a front row seat validating and
Yeah.
quantifying outcomes for nearly 5 years. And they were amazing in regards to what they brought forward and arguably in ways as a pioneer and trailblazer
Hmm.
around bringing whole health into reality, bringing the chronic melded with the mental, melded with physical productive lifestyle all in one to simplify that patient experience. The reality is when we think about where they were at as a pioneer in 2014, bringing this forward, and then later on when I launched them at Boeing, we saw a convergence of investment on the M&A side as well as on the health plan carrier side and the digital health side, by which they were listening to their clients saying, "Hey, it's great that you're doing something around diabetes or something
Hmm.
around weight loss or something around somewhere else, but we need help in all these other areas." That kind
Yeah.
of brings it all home. And for that reason, I think in some ways Vito was really a trailblazer to lead the way on the notion of whole health. We see it a lot over the last few years in various conferences around how do we get there for Medicare Advantage or Medicaid or commercial ASO business with employers
Hmm.
where they have that easy button and they can have instantaneous access with the human centric provider that is under that. The other thing that I would tell you is having two daughters, I was really from a diversity standpoint, I was really looking at Boeing at diverse leaders and founders, whether they were female or any minority for that matter, and really trying to
Hmm.
embrace and bring some of those solutions forward and champion their efforts as well, and help them, raise the bar on all the good that they were doing. So, Stephanie Tenelanius, who's the founder CEO at
Hmm.
Vida, just brilliant leader. Have a
She
ton of
is.
respect and admiration for her and the team over there. And,
Hmm.
I really thought this could be a lot of fun as far as really trying to take something that I believe in, that I've experienced, and as opposed to, maybe going with a solution where I'd be employee number one or two and trying to
Hmm.
sink that 100-foot putt with massive upside potential, but, high risk reward profile too with that. Whereas, we
Yep.
had just closed the Series D round of funding in May of 2021 to the tune of 110 million, led by General Atlantic and other notable, reputable venture cap firms. So,
Hmm.
certainly that was validating in regards to the money flow and the investment and,
Hmm.
the reputation, of these different entities that were definitely champion Vita's mission go forward at that time as well, and after.
When you joined, what was different than you expected, and what was more difficult than you expected?
I tell everybody, leaving a 100-year-old company like an AT&T or a Boeing and going to the innovator side, and on the innovator side, it's different in a fun way. So
Hmm.
a lot of these companies in the Fortune 500 are structured for good reason with the best of intentions. There might be, committee reviews and,
Hmm.
review and approval processes that, might not happen overnight, right? Might take time, or procurement might take
Hmm.
time. And you have, and maybe that's maybe more the aircraft carrier analogy. And you have this
Hmm.
innovator over here that's like a speedboat. And what you dream up, you can make it fly and you can make it happen, much
Hmm.
quicker. So that the entrepreneurial spirit of it all is pretty fun and exciting. And having the opportunity to as well to, I would say, connect and network with a lot of my colleagues on the employer side, but also across the spectrum, not just on
Hmm.
commercial employer business, but even on the provider side or health plan side. I had worked with a lot of them as well over the years. So, just trying to help them understand, no sales pitch, but just help them understand, here's how we might be able to add value to you. Maybe it's,
Yeah.
improving efficiencies or cost savings opportunities, or, revenue, improvements for the clients or customers or patients they might be serving based on what we do. That's been really different in a fun way, right? And then when we
Hmm.
think about the employer side, they're going to only be able to do so much in any given year, but helping them understand whenever the time is right that we're there for them, we'll have their back, and we can add, enormous value to their bottom line. And the other thing that I would tell you is on the employer side, I was really focusing on value. As a team, we were looking at a number of
Hmm.
value-based contracts, direct contracting. I think that's essential if you're an employer, a self-funded employer with your benefits. So if you can take that mindset and bring it on the innovator side, that speaks volumes. So like in October of 2021, and I was pretty adamant about this early on, I'm like, hey, this isn't our first rodeo. Let's put our money where our mouth is and put 100% fees at risk. Let's guarantee
Yep.
engagement. Let's guarantee clinical outcomes. Let's validate or guarantee ROI, financial savings. And if we
Hmm.
don't deliver it, they don't pay. Simple as that. So about 6 months after I joined, Stephanie and the team, they're like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That's a key differentiator in the market, right? When we think about the whole vendor
Yeah.
landscape, there's hardly anyone that was doing it back at that moment in time, and others have followed our lead. But we did that full stack, full stop,
Hmm.
for chronic, mental, and physical preventive lifestyle all in one. And that's really served as a nice tailwind to differentiate on a value-based way,
Yeah.
with clients and prospects. How there's no downside financial risk for them. They have nothing to lose. It's all
Yeah.
upside, savings. So why would you not consider us, based on all the good we can bring forward?
I love that. When you believe in something, you're a lot more effective in communicating. And ultimately, something you said about advice you gave, I think, to your sales team, where you said, hey, like, we want to bring value. Like, that's how we approach our clients. I'm a big believer, in sales, and I'm like a sales nerd. I read every book known to man, and I, try to a ton of continuing education. I really pick the brain of any great salesperson I talk to. I think salespeople have to ask themselves, why is it in the person I'm talking to's best interest? And if you can't answer that question, the conversation ends at that point. Hey, I don't think I'm bringing value. Maybe we, can't in the future. And that's really like a really important thing that I teach everyone I've ever trained. And, I teach my whole team all the time is it doesn't matter what's good for you. If it's not good for the, other stakeholders in the deal and, whatever you're working on, then hit the pause button and come back when you can. And that's it. So I think that's, something I live by and something I teach. And, I think you said it, really, really well. Talk to me about when you moved over to Vida. I assume there was like differences that were unexpected. So like, let's just use an example. When you were sitting at Boeing and you called someone from Omada, or you called someone from Livongo, or you called someone from Vida, when they were one of your clients or a prospective client, I assume they called you back pretty much right away. Same thing with when you were, working with the HIR, anyone, that you were communicating with badly wanted to work with Boeing or badly wanted to work with AT&T in those days. When you go to the vendor, I assume you're having to wait a little bit longer for a return phone call than you were before. So kind of walk me through like how that, impacted you and, what was that transition like going from the company everyone wanted to work with to a company that again brings a ton of value, but wasn't as known, wasn't that name brand. You were more the one chasing than the one being chased.
Norm, it's a great question because you are so right. I could call anybody in America pretty much. I'd
Yeah.
get that call back. And it wasn't just an innovator, right? It could be, I mean, any employer, it could
Mm-hmm.
be almost anyone. And I would get that call back or I would get that email back, right? I'd get that response.
Mm-hmm.
On the innovator side, I think to some extent, there's no agenda. I've been fortunate to establish relationships with a lot of wonderful people, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a salesperson by nature. I'm just trying to educate and inform where I can, or help them
Mm-hmm.
understand if there's anything I can do to help them with what they're trying to solve for, even outside of the
Mm-hmm.
boundary of Vida. You know, I'll give them some free insights and referrals or contacts if I can help add value for them. And I think it's more of
Mm-hmm.
a friendship or a relationship built on trust. And that certainly varies from, folks that I know really, really well to some less so,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all the best of intentions and having your heart in the right place. And there's a few things I would leave you with that I really took back, but I had the privilege of going to the Boeing Leadership Center right outside St. Louis, Missouri. And we had a number of different leadership programs on there as world class, top notch. And we had some internal and even external speakers from time to time come in. But two things that I always took back, and even to this day will always keep in my mind. The one is be bold, be brief, and be gone. And the two
Mm-hmm.
things I added to that is if they like you, maybe you'll be back too, right? But be bold, be
Yeah.
brief, and be gone. And, time is precious. And, that's probably the last thing people want to throw on their calendar, especially if they're an employer is, oh boy, here's another vendor. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'm certainly mindful of. The second thing though is, and this was from another leader that mentioned these words, and I think it's a quote from someone famous, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So
Yeah.
if you can at least exemplify or demonstrate that you're not going after chasing a sale or trying to win a deal or whatever, but you're really trying to help them in any capacity, again, with or without Vida, where I sit today.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the relationship, and they have to know you, like you, and trust you. And hopefully, if they know you, like you, trust you, Norm, they're gonna be happy to work
Mm-hmm.
with you and talk with you and partner with you. As long as you continue to do what you do. So I try to think through those three different examples as far as how that applies. But
Mm-hmm.
out of the gate, it's interesting. When I first came to Vida, and you might find this interesting, I wanted to understand from trusted industry experts that I knew, that I liked, that I trust,
Mhm.
what they knew about Vida. So I just, no sales pitch, no agenda, is very transparent. I'm like, there's no right or wrong answer, but just tell me what you know.
Yeah.
And if you know a lot, that's great. If you had pitches, that's great. If you don't know anything, that's great too. But I used to do this at Boeing when we used to host, or actually go to sites and do a work environment assessment called a WIA. But we'd meet with all segments of the workforce at that particular site, hourly paid, salaried, production workers, you name it. And we would spend a week and try to understand, if they were king or queen for a day and had a magic wand, what are three things they would change right now, and what are three
Mhm.
things that they would say, don't mess with, this is great, it's perfect. And we learned a
Yeah.
ton from that. And I was trying to take that idea, that mindset, into, from wearing the Vida hat now, understanding, where are we at today in the industry? What do
Yeah.
you know? What do you like? What do you feel that we do great, or what do you not even know at all? And that was really informative to me to kind of take back. And from there, I realized, like anything, we always have an opportunity to educate and inform. So let's focus on that first. And I would,
Mhm.
think about that from an employer perspective too. And then secondly, if and when the time is right and there is mutual interest to perhaps pursue an opportunity at some time down the road, at least we've taken that first step to educate and inform. And from there, we can build on that into maybe participating in an RFP, or bidding on their business in some capacity, but also having opportunities to refresh and update them as we evolve as an innovator too, because we're innovating every single year with new programs. And certainly the hot topics today are obesity, GLP-1s, and mental health is still very hot. So
Mhm.
when we think about what we do in both of those areas, and certainly beyond from a whole health standpoint, there's a lot of good that we can bring forward. And, I think it's important for them to at least have that foundation of understanding from an educated and informed perspective.
Mhm.
So those are some things that, kind of took me outside from an external standpoint, whereas,
Mhm.
previously it was more internal employer focused on really understanding, what matters most to our employees and how can we best meet them where they're at.
All right. Well, you're talking my language. Everything you said resonated with me. It's about partnership. It's about really listening, understanding where someone's at, and meeting them. Where they are. It's interesting. Most of the time, when I meet someone for the first time, I ask them whether it's a potential client or it's a candidate we're working with the first time. I'm like, hey, what do you think of recruiters? What's your experience been like? And that just, again, completely opens up the conversation. I get an understanding of what their experience has been, what their perception is. And a lot of times, it's very different than the way we do business, and I take a lot of pride in that we're, really a lot more focused on solving solutions than, just pitching our clients. I don't pitch any clients immediately in my call. I say, hey, tell me about you, your career, what you're looking to accomplish, the timing of it, and what I'd have to bring you that would make sense. I don't care if the next time I call you is in 4 years, but it will be what you described to me as what you're looking for, as opposed to me calling you every 2 weeks, pitching you, hey, I got something new. I got something new. It's like, if it's not fit, it doesn't make any sense. So I think that really resonated with me. And I'm laughing because my team will be like, hey, how much did you pay Jason to say that when you said be bold, be brief, and be gone? I'm a big fan of, being very direct, being, as brief as I can be. Because again, people are busy, they do not have a lot of time. So if you can get your message across and be gone, and they're like even leaving that conversation wanting a little bit more, that's probably a good thing, because they know next time your call comes up, they're like, oh, I only have 10 minutes, but Norm, he's usually pretty direct and pretty brief. I can take this call. You don't want someone to answer the phone and say, oh, I don't have enough time for that. I only have 20 minutes before my next call, and I don't think they're going to let me off the phone before that. You want to be someone that, a busy person can be like, hey, they're respectable of my time, and I always can kind of squeeze them in. So that's great. What is your advice for other people, maybe a little less bold than you, that always toyed with the idea of, joining a vendor, coming from the benefits side, but maybe haven't made the plunge. What advice would you give that person, whether they're a benefits leader, whether they're a benefits consultant, whether they're a carrier person, just someone from like a bigger entity going to a smaller entity? What advice would you give?
I would tell them, number one, do your due diligence and take full
Hmm.
advantage of talking. I mean, I would just offer this up. Talk to me. I'll tell you straight
Hmm.
up how I looked at risk reward profile, what I learned from other innovators and founders and CEOs as far as, trying to sort out, where and when and how to make that leap. I also talked with other, I would say, consultants that did make the leap from the
Hmm.
consulting side to the innovator side, as well as past employer benefit leaders that made the leap over to the innovator side as well.
Hmm.
And there's not a lot of them, but they are out there. And I
Yep.
did really learn a ton from their experience and how they kind of assessed their decision making process and why they even went, and what was the trigger, and are they happy, and how is it going. I think
Hmm.
at the end of the day, the thing that I was really trying to identify with is I want to have fun with what I'm going to do. I want to work around a
Hmm.
great, brilliant team of people that are fun to work with. And I want to certainly believe that what I'm doing is going to make a difference in a positive way. And, at the end of the day, whether you go to a Series A round innovator or a Series D
Hmm.
round, or maybe even one that already had their IPO, you can still
Hmm.
have fun in all those different areas. And the risk reward profile obviously is going to change dramatically, based on if you're in seed financing, Series A versus D versus post IPO. But it just depends what your appetite for that risk is, and what type of upside potential that you think you can bring and add value to, and does that align with where they're looking to
Hmm.
take things. We've also seen in the last year and a half or so a ton of venture cap investment drying up. So with
Hmm.
that comes a lot of pivots and go to market strategy, and a lot of changes with a lot of
Yep.
innovators that might be just trying to figure out how do we preserve cash from a cash burn
Hmm.
standpoint, and how do we close more deals and generate more revenue, and how do we work more efficiently. So those are I would say similar opportunities that you'd find on the employer side too, in good economic times, and tough times, right? We
Hmm.
all have experienced it through those cycles. And it's certainly it's yeah, but the due diligence is number one, and reaching out and talking with some folks, and then
Hmm.
ultimately trying to align with those thought leaders and innovators that really match exactly what you're looking to do and how you can add value and have fun.
I'm really enjoying this. I know we're getting to the top of the hour. Do you have a little bit more time to go
Yep,
over?
you bet.
All right, cool. So obviously the obvious is when someone's deciding about making that move, it's like, hey, am I going stability or am I going upside? Staying at a bigger company, more stable, going to a smaller company, there might be more financial upside. But like, what are the differences in the day to day that you've enjoyed? What do you look back on and say, hey, I love my time at AT&T, I love my time at Boeing, but I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore, certain aspects of the job. And what are certain things where you're like, I never had the opportunity to do this before joining Vida, and I really enjoy this part of my day to day? Because I think, like, of course, when you look back on it, you can kind of do the analysis, oh, would I've made more here, whatever it may be. But like, do you enjoy your day to day is the most important thing when you're talking about making a career move. And I think, it's very easy to get into a dollars and cents analysis, but, I think, are you happier? Are you more excited going to work? Are you more, is it more rewarding? Those things I think need to be taken in the conversation as well.
Yeah, that's so true. And the just a few thoughts on that. One is life is short, right? I'm in the
Yeah.
back nine of my career, and I'm at a point where I'm probably more open to really thinking where I want to spend my time, who I want to
Hmm.
spend it with, who do I enjoy, what do I enjoy doing with my time. And I think time for you, I, and everybody else that listens to this is gonna, that's our most precious commodity.
It
How do we want
is.
to spend time with our family, based on our that situation, and what kind of balance do we want. What matters most. So I think it's a great opportunity to reflect back as an individual and think, all right,
Mm-hmm.
based on wherever I'm at in my career, whether I'm early or, mid career or, kind of towards the back 9 holes of my career, what do I want to do with my time, and where do I want to go? Who do I want to work with? What kind of people? And some of it is a leap of faith, right? You might just not
Mm-hmm.
know. The other part is I would tell you on the employer side, and this is pretty typical, but I would, easily get 100, 200 plus emails a day,
Mm-hmm.
and I would get a ton of text messages too. You might have some fire drills or unanticipated events that happen in any employer. So you might have to recalibrate. What is a priority today might have to go to the back burner tomorrow, and we
Mm-hmm.
might need to refocus. I mean, the pandemic was a great example of that. How do we do return to work and testing and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Relative to that phase of time. So you have some of these curveballs that come at you. And, I think on the innovator side, you might not have 200 emails every day, right? You might not
Mm-hmm.
have these fire drills because typically it's a smaller, integrated team that is not as vast and may not have the bureaucracy and the red tape that, again,
Mm-hmm.
well intended and certainly appropriate in most cases, out of necessity for compliance or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think the velocity by which we can move the needle in all that we do is a
Mm-hmm.
lot more apparent to me being on the innovator side.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more creative and flexible to, again, not just incubate, but also listen to what industry leaders, experts, what clients, most importantly, are
Mm-hmm.
asking out of their partners. And I kind of view myself more or less as a trusted advisor, right? That's what I aspire to be. I think you would too, Norm,
Mm-hmm.
for whoever
For
you
sure.
interact with. And I think that's key. So you're not viewed as like a sales guy or a partnerships individual, but you're really their trusted advisor, their partner that is going to do whatever it takes and bend over backwards to help them succeed in all that they do for the good of their employer. And I think that's very gratifying too when we can
Mm-hmm.
see the member testimonials that utilize a Vida solution and see all the good that we're bringing them on weight
Yeah.
loss and mental health and chronic condition management. It is so important. And, that's our North Star when we look at what impact we're driving. Those are the most heart wrenching and gratifying. And there's one employee testimonial that I did see out
Mm-hmm.
of Boeing of all clients, came out about a year ago, but it was from Vida, where
Yeah.
this individual was very open about and courageous about making this public. And it was even posted on LinkedIn in the last year. But she talked about how she suffered from anxiety, depression, and how Vida saved her life. And when you can
Wow.
have that type of impact to where you're not just helping people get better, but in this
Mm-hmm.
case, saving people's lives, that is amazing and so gratifying. I think that's so rewarding with the work that we're doing and aspiring to deliver in the future.
Yeah, I think like take the financials aside, the advantages, at least from my perception of working at an early stage company, are you have a lot more autonomy and you have a lot more ability to be creative and be someone who comes up with new solutions. The challenges are that can be very difficult and why some people go to a vendor and go back is I would argue more accountability, more pressure, and more pressure on you to come up with what are you doing all day, as opposed to at a bigger company you're kind of told like what to do, what you need to accomplish, how to accomplish it. In a startup there's a lot more ambiguity, and if you like creative problem solving and you like when you're given a lot of responsibility and you have an opportunity to come in and perform and maybe even outperform expectation, it's great. So I think like really folks who love being given tasks and not necessarily like a roadmap of how to do it, and they find that like creative stimulation really exciting, those folks love it. But there are folks that, again, everyone's different, kind of like to be told what to do and how to do it, and be given the whole guide and instruction. Then you're probably better off in a bigger company. That's just what I've noticed, and what type of people do really well and what type of people kind of struggle when making that transition. So a question I've wanted to ask you for a long time is you've sat on both sides of the fence. You've been a benefits leader buying these solutions, and now you're at a vendor implementing these solutions. I think it's really easy to point the finger after the fact. You bought it, it's not getting the engagement you want, you're not seeing the results you want. You're like, oh, well, it's all the vendor. I think there's also a lot of responsibility on the buying side. Like once you buy it, what are you doing to help the vendor succeed? So I guess my question is, now that you've sat in both seats, how can a benefits leader be a great customer? Meaning, how can they be a good collaborator if they're not seeing the results they immediately want to see? How can they work together collaboratively with the vendor to get the results they want?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question because it's going to vary a bit from one employer to another as far as what they're willing to do and support. So, I would tell you that it's essential if an innovator and an employer client are working together, and if they're looking to achieve meaningful engagement, enrollment, utilization, which will in turn obviously translate into quantifiable outcomes clinically and financially, they need to have a roadmap and alignment on how they're going to execute. And that is something as simple or complex as a communication strategy. To what extent and to what myriad of ways can we outreach to that target addressable market? How can we effectively and efficiently get our message across just to create awareness that we're here for you and this is all we do all together as far as, from a Vida standpoint, and really scrutinizing, not just on day one, week one, month one, but longitudinally, how can we continue to enhance and improve that outreach, that communication strategy in an omni-channel way that can meet people where they're at, right? Because, there might be people in the office or working from home or based on their family dynamic. Maybe, the employee is less involved with healthcare decision-making and maybe it's the significant other, the spouse, whatever. So how do we reach those people and, ultimately drive those targeted engagement, enrollment outcomes that we're looking right out of the gate. And then from there, that outreach is so critical to build that foundation of awareness and ultimate engagement that, it's on the vendor, right? It's on the innovator partner to do what they said they were going to do. And that's driving high net promoter scores or member satisfaction scores and really driving the clinical outcomes that, they're beholden to based on a contract, which typically might have performance guarantees, fees at risk, service level agreements, all that good stuff. That's essential too. But, that's more, just getting, I would say, out in front of the people is so important. And there's a myriad of ways to do that. I mean, we can do it through benefit fairs, open enrollment season. We could do it through social media, where we do outreach through Instagram and Facebook and other stuff like that. We can send postcards, snail mail to the home address. I mean, there's a myriad of opportunities, but I think that's always the key thing. What the industry has faced for the past decade is, I would say, an industry-wide suboptimal engagement enrollment conundrum, where they brought in all these solutions. They haven't seen the level of utilization and engagement that they had aspired to see or realize. And, now they're wondering, well, why isn't this working the way we had hoped? And I think, it's just kind of a retrain the brain on, it's a new day as far as how we can, I would say champion, more effectively getting our messaging across in a better way. It doesn't always require a volume, right? And I think that's the other thing. Like I've seen a lot of vendors that say, hey, here's our communication strategy. It's going to take care of everything. But, the employer might say, hey, we're not supportive of emails, or, we're going to do 1/3 of that or 1/4 of what you're proposing because, we don't want to overwhelm our people with a message every day. And that's totally understandable too. So I think you have to find the right balance and alignment as far as what can be supported there. And then from there, once you have that, that pathway forward, then it's just a matter of making sure. I think the other thing that cannot be underestimated is data. If we have access to, claims data, we can target who are the big fish in a pond from an ROI, clinical ROI standpoint. Who are the people in a polychronic state with multiple chronic health conditions that we can cater to and we can help them. And if they have, an underlying mental health need that they may or may not know about, We can help them too there. But like, how can we extrapolate into data, right? Through the benefit data warehouse or through that employer client, like what's going on amongst their workforce that they may or may not even be aware of, so we can run some deep dive analytics to understand who might be opportunistic for us to help now, because maybe they're doing nothing, right, with their chronic conditions that they might be grappling with or their anxiety, depression, but we can absolutely help them. And maybe it's an accessibility or affordability thing. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack, but I think the data is the second piece that can really move the needle in a big way and be more precise with the targeting.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in partnerships are only successful when both groups are fully invested. Like, I'll use an example in my business. Let's say a client of ours or a new client of ours, let's use that because we wouldn't work with a company continuously if we experienced this. Maybe they have a great reputation and a great product, but their interview process is flawed. So let's say they contract us. They say, hey, we need to go find this skill set. It's something right in my team's wheelhouse. And my team finds the best slate of candidates that possibly exists. The hiring manager reschedules, the interviews with the candidates 2 or 3 times before talking to them. They show up late to the interview. They don't sell like the opportunity at all. It's like purely like screening them and, really almost berating them with questions, as an interview process. They get to the end, maybe they make an underwhelming offer. Maybe that offer takes a week and a half for them to receive the offer from the time they had the final interview. Like, we could have done the best job in the world, but like if our client isn't willing to invest time, energy, resources into making it a great interview experience, we're not going to get the result we want. So I think it's the same type of thing. I think sometimes vendors, take too much of the blame, for it not working, because sometimes they're not getting the equal investment, on the other side. And I'm sure there's plenty of examples where the employer makes a lot of investment and the vendor doesn't meet them all the way there. So I think it's just something really important in all client partnerships that, there's got to be alignment. There's got to be investment, whether it's relationships, partnerships, whatever it may be. Last question I will ask you on the business side, and then I have a couple quick personal ones. But you've, been a buyer for many, many years. Now you've seen the vendor side. What advice would you give to salespeople or founders that are trying to sell a benefits leader as a customer? Like, what are general guiding principles? What are the do's and what are the definitely don't do's?
Yeah. First is how they connect with you, whether it's through, let's say, EHIR, or whether it's just a cold call or an email. I think, there's a number of examples, but if they could be very direct and clear and concise and address the why, start with why. Like, why would I even want to take time out of my busy day to meet with you? And, sometimes it might be useful if they could even provide a 1-page executive summary that just helps me at a glance understand who they are, why should I care, what problem are they solving, all the basics as far as their value prop. I could peer review that maybe in less than 5 minutes and see, hey, this might be something that would be helpful for me this year, or this might be not a priority today, but maybe I want to spend 15 minutes, kind of learn, the basics of what they're all about, and then kind of put it on the back burner and revisit it a year from now when, this might be an area that we're interested in focusing more time and resources around. So I think it's twofold. It's the outreach and how they do it. Are they, being a pest, or are they really being thoughtful and, conscientious of the time and outreach, and, what's the volume of outreaches that they're making to you? The second thing is just being very, kind of going back to be bold, be brief, be gone. If they could just be very clear and maybe provide me, like the spoiler alert, what's the bottom line on this thing? And if there's something there, great. One of the things that I always did, Norm, was I generally said yes to listening to an innovator when I was on the employer side, just to learn for the first time who they are, what they're about, what the problem they're solving. Because I knew full well, odds are I might not be able to do anything or seriously consider anything right now with them because, train left the station. We're already fully squared away on our priorities this year, and, we're working on it. But I might be able to help that innovator out by introducing them if they haven't already met EHIR. And this might be a
Yep.
wonderful platform for them to pursue. So,
Mm-hmm.
or, when I was chairman of the board of Midwest Business Group on Health, you might want to reach out to Midwest Business Group on Health and some of the other regional and
Yeah.
national groups on health and coalitions on health. They're all wonderful. But, they're also looking for, I would say, that not just the employer side, but the innovator side too, to bring in for sponsorships and speaking opportunities or client engagement. So there's ways to, I'd say, maybe not give them a hard no today, but also give them redirection that could help
Mm-hmm.
them with what they're trying to pursue and achieve.
And just follow-up question to that, like that seems great advice for getting the initial meeting. But once you've got the locked-in meeting and hey, we want to hear the pitch, we'll give you 30 minutes of our time. Any do's and don't do's there?
Yeah, I would say the do's are be honest. We can tell right out of the gate if they're just making outlandish statements around ROI
Mm-hmm.
and other stuff that just doesn't sound right or look right or feel right. So I be honest, be straightforward, be very clear, concise.
Mm-hmm.
I would even venture to say, and I saw this a couple months ago, if they can boil down, their pitch, like have that elevator pitch, that might be a minute or less.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have something that's very tight that could be done in maybe 6 to 7 minutes. And then, for something that might be a little bit more deeper for that intro, maybe have something that could be 15 minutes, but no more than 30. If you can
Mm-hmm.
do something in 30 or less, that's pretty typical. But you're going to need that hook that's going to raise the curiosity on the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you really need like something that's going to really differentiate and distinguish why you're coming at it from a different angle. What
Mm-hmm.
makes you maybe best in class or a thought leader? You're taking care of something that no one's even paying attention or aware of, right? And no one
Mm-hmm.
has a clue about this. So those are all intriguing opportunities where maybe it's just an entirely different way of thinking about something that we've been looking at for years on end. And, it's an entirely different approach. But I think,
Mm-hmm.
when you make some outlandish statements about, we can deliver 10 to 1 ROI and, all this other stuff, it's like questionable at best. So, and
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes, all right, prove it, right? Show me what you've
Yeah.
done. What peer-reviewed journal articles or white papers or case studies or client testimonials back up what you're telling me is legit. It works. It's easy. And sometimes, there isn't anything yet because they're brand new. So you have
Yeah.
to balance that out too.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies make the mistake of getting way too in the weeds, throwing out a lot of statistics without like the why should I care piece. So, we've had all types of great sales leaders, earlier on the podcast, both Manny Menendez and Julie Stadelbauer both were like storytelling is so crucial. And Sean McBride, from Lira mentioned like it should be a conversation. Like your goal in that 30 minutes is not to get all your points across. It's here's why you should care. Here's a patient story. And then like, tell me about you guys. Like, tell me about your company and what struggles you're having and like getting a lot of customer feedback and having a lot of, discussion. That's what I've noticed, in terms of the feedback I get and also which companies, I've worked with that have been really successful. So I will move lastly to how do you practice what you preach? You've lived benefits and wellness for 30 plus years now. Walk me through how you personally participate in wellness, through exercise, through reducing stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say year one of the pandemic, that was a great opportunity for me to get back on the golf course for the first time in a long
Mm-hmm.
time. So when
Yeah.
you think about stress, I usually try, if possible, and obviously based on schedule, I usually try to get a 7 a.m. tee time first out of the gate and
Yeah.
knock out 18 holes in under 2 hours and no one in front, no waiting. But having fresh air and just getting out is so like peaceful. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. The other thing that I would say is sometimes it's rainy. Like I'm up in Chicago, so it's going to be cold in a few more months, right? So
Mm-hmm.
probably not golfing anytime soon, in the winter months.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I did was at Boeing we had free on-site fitness centers, which was amazing. So I took advantage of
Mm-hmm.
that. But like after leaving Boeing, I joined Lifetime. So there's a Lifetime a few minutes away. So Lifetime Gym, I'll go in and throw like a 30-minute cardio workout, on a treadmill and just, get the steps in. And, so that maybe as an alternative is also somewhat peaceful and kind of gratifying once you kind of wrap up your workout. And, if you do anything else beyond the cardio, more power to you. But when I was younger, I hated the treadmill. I'd rather go play basketball or sports or something like that with a group of people, and just have a fun time doing that. But that's one thing. I think the other thing that is essential is I've done a ton of travel over the past decade, and Boeing and even post Boeing at Vida, and some of the things that have worked well, like when I'm home, I love to grill, right? So if I'm going to grill, I love to, throw like asparagus and salmon and, just something like that on the grill. And that's always great. But when I'm on the road, this is something that you might get a kick out of, but it's an RX bar.
Oh yeah. Delish.
Yeah. So the analogy of this, which I've used in the past in some speaking engagements is, the RX bar, you got 3 egg whites, you got 6 almonds, 4 cashews, 2 dates, and no BS. And, just to not turn off anybody, I'd say no bad stuff, right? But if we can have like this level of transparency and everything we're doing from a benefit standpoint, whether you're vetting out an innovator or if you're looking at your PBM contract and trying to make sense of that, there's a lot of good that we can do if we could just have like data transparency and everything just very simple put like that.
I love that. Anything else on the healthy recipe side other than, asparagus and salmon that you like to cook, whether it's you or your family?
Yeah. So again, I'd go back to like the grilling side of things. Like I'll grill almost anything, but love throwing like fish and seafood out on the grill, when I can. And that's always fun, but we'll do, stuff like that. My wife, she doesn't really appreciate cooking much. So,
neither does mine. I'm the cook in the house.
Yeah. So like, there's like, a few places nearby where we live in Naperville, and, they have like these pre-cooked healthy, meals that are already prepackaged. All you gotta do is pop it in the oven and,
Ooh, nice.
bake it or grill it for a little bit, and, you're on your way, but all the hard work's already been taken care of. So we'll do stuff like that.
So your keys to health: healthy eating, grilling fish, and seafood on the grill, going a Lifetime, getting a run in, and playing golf. I will say this: you must be a much better golfer than I, because you think it's relaxing. There are some relaxing rounds, but I've had maybe my most frustrating experiences, most stressful experiences on the golf course. So I got to get my swing together. But anyways, Jason, thank you so much, for joining us and stepping into the ring on the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast. I think this was just an incredible episode. A lot of great info for all of our audience. And again, thank you so much for what you're doing in the space and what you have done in the space, and for joining us on this episode. Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.